Welcome to Recovery Equity, a series of conversations about how we can reach and help more people find freedom from substance use disorders, or what some refer to as addiction. This is a space for us to reflect on some hard truths and to consider ways forward and even new possibilities. I am Randi Tolliver, a master trainer consultant and supervisor of clinical trainers with the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, but am not currently practicing. Today, we are talking with Dr. Peter Hayden, the president and CEO of Turning Point Programs, about how to create a culture to effectively engage and serve the Black community. Welcome, Dr. Hayden. Thank you so much for being here with us today. To start us off, would you tell us who and what is Turning Point Programs?
Turning Point's a culturally specific service center that meets the needs of mental health, chemical health, housing, and outreach services. We've been in business for 44 years, and we treat predominantly people of color. However, we deal with it from a cultural aspect. Therefore, everyone is not a certain hue. For example, not dark as I, but they have a culture that blends into the means that we are working with.
Thank you. So Peter, thinking about how Turning Point does its work, what's the first step to effectively engage and serve individuals in the Black community?
Thank you. That's a great question. I believe training is so important. And what I mean by training, not the academic side of the training, but understanding the people you work with. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we deal more with the academic side and the piece with regards to the person you're working with. For example, when I was growing up, someone always said, if it was a white person, always said I look like some entertainer. Whoever that was, Jay-Z or whoever the point was. I think they did that trying to get kudos with me, but that's not the way you start the conversation. Mm-hmm. I would start the conversation from, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Mm-hmm. You know, I can tell you. Then I would say, what school did you go to? I would ask certain questions that would make that person feel good. You say, what does that have to do with treatment? It has a lot to do because you got to open the door before you can step in.
So it's really about starting with the person first.
That's right.
As an individual.
That's correct.
Great.
Because the questions and the treatment that people are going to go through, if they don't trust you, you cannot get them to that next level. Mm-hmm. That's why Turning Point, when we opened, we were a Black program, and all the people came to the program was Black. So that took 50% of the trust. People trusted in you because you look like them, or they knew your parents, or they knew someone that you could talk about.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Peter, you mentioned training. What are some of the training needs of providers that would help them better understand and better serve individuals in the Black community?
I think that the training that's needed is more than listen to Motown or hip hop. It's more of that there has to be some way that you can go to a program like a Turning Point, a program that serves the needs of the people that you're working with. Mm-hmm. For example, I was the chair of the National Black Alcoholism and Addiction Council. We had once a year a program that lasted five days that would allow people to come in, ask questions, get themselves positioned in a way that they were comfortable and the trust level was there, and that then we would go forth. And we taught a lot of different classes in 5 days for 12 hours a day. And so that's the training. You have to be trained, not necessarily from the University of Minnesota, but you have to be trained from an organization like NBAC, National Black Alcoholism and Addiction Council.
So in some of what you're talking about, it sounds like culture. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, culture is a big deal for me. I have prepared a few things just to talk around culture. Let me just start it a different way. Where I live, there is about in this community I live, and I've been in this community 20 years, over 20 years. There's about maybe 2 Indian from India families. I think I'm the only African American family in here. It might have been 2 before, and then maybe one other family of color. There's 265 homes in this community. I can tell you, I've never been to any one of theirs home except one.
Okay.
Just one. And that's not to make the people feel bad. It's just the fact, what do we have in common? Or that was their thought. What do we have in common? And if I invite them over, do I do it because George Floyd was murdered and just console them and things of this nature? So what happens out here is that the majority of people vote, they vote alike, they go to lunch, dinner alike. Their kids are part of the program, whether it's soccer or whatever. My kids played soccer, basketball, and track. And 4 years, they were #1 students, but they were also academic. But only time we saw people was at the soccer field or whatever the case is. We never talked about anything that made sense. And therefore, we didn't have anything in common. Now, certainly the kind of person I am, I made sure that we were friends and things of this nature. But when you talk about the culture, so there's a culture out here, but it doesn't include me. When we talk about culture, most people deal with culture in the terms of a color, so all the people of one color tend to go to the same place. There was a book that said that we don't talk. And when you don't talk, you have some issues that are not helpful for the community as a whole. We need to talk, and we need to be able to talk and not always agree, but necessarily don't disagree so much that you become true enemies. So when you're talking about, you walk into a treatment program, you're a counselor or whatever the case is, and that's the other thing. If you look at Turning Point's president is African American. That's who we serve, African American. The COO is African American because that's who we serve. The board, the majority of board members look like the people we serve. So when I'm going to another program and everything I see doesn't look like me, that tells me something. But then when the culture comes into it, because Turning Point started off as an Afrocentric organization, now it's has all colors of flavors, hues, and things of this nature. But the reason for it is because the people that's coming in are culturally fit to the program that we serve. They either married to some other person in terms of the color, there's kids, or so therefore you start talking. So if they went to another program, it would not work well for them because that's not who they are.
That's great. I really appreciate how you framed that. So, Peter, what's the most important thing to understand when we talk about culture?
Culture is a building block. And if you don't start with culture, you're going to have a problem. Example, I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. Grew up in the predominantly African American community. I used to see all kinds of people. But fortunately, I had the opportunity to go to a school called De La Salle Military Academy. It wasn't just De La Salle, but it was a military academy. But you know what's great about going to the school? You still came home every evening. So that culture that I was receiving from my religious program that I had and these kinds of things, that didn't deter me from coming home to mom, coming home to my community, and still culturally be oriented in a way that is sweeten the person I am and the better that I got. So by going to De La Salle and then going on to the University of Minnesota, and all these things happened because I went to the University of Minnesota because it was some problems in the community and people wanted to solve the community. So they said, hey, we're going to give you a scholarship. But I always knew the man I was, the person I was. So culturally, I knew how to differentiate between color and culture. So when you talk about walking down the street and you had enough of cardboard in your shoes, you're not the only one. I would just show you. If a white person had the same thing, well, culturally, we have something in common. Now I'm breaking it down. I could be here and I could articulate in a manner that they'd say, oh, his words are so good. But words don't do anything when you're working with people who have one chance to save their lives. That's what person has to come in. Just as the Hippocratic oath to a doctor, the person has to come in as a counselor and say, I've got one chance to save this person's life.
That's well said, well said. And so, Peter, as we're just on our last few minutes of this interview, can you share with us how Turning Point programs put these elements into practice?
I always like that question because let me just tell you, wherever you work, do you have a holiday on Rosa Parks' birthday? Wherever you work, do you have a holiday on Malcolm X's birthday?
We have the option of it, yes.
You follow me? Yes,
I hear you.
That's what Turning Point does. We looked at, if you go all through Turning Point, you see nothing but pictures of Jackie Robinson, Aretha Franklin, all these people. Why do we do that? So when our clients or our family members go through the halls, they see people who look like them. And if they don't know who they are, they ask, who is that person? And we tell them. And those are the small things that we do to recognize who we are. I see myself through the mirror.
Yes.
And I have someone to explain who I am versus a child who loved Superman, and I love Superman. But why would I have in the mirror a picture that looks like me and Superman that's a white person, rather than me as Superman as an African American person that loves myself? Dr. White said in his book, he said, what is wrong with me liking who I am? And not punish you for who you are. Well, that's Turning Point. That's the makeup of Turning Point. You come to Turning Point, all kinds of people come into Turning Point and they just feel the vibe. They say, oh, I love it. And this is not just Black people, this is all people, because that's the type of person we are. That doesn't mean we're weak. That means we have compassion.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Hayden. And yes, I really appreciate when you said it's okay to see ourselves and to like ourselves. I think that's very powerful. So on behalf of everyone watching or listening in, I want to thank you, Dr. Hayden, for giving us so much to think about and take into our lives. And to everyone out there, please let your friends and colleagues know about these conversations. And come back often to catch more episodes of Recovery Equity. Because together, we can build a healthier, happier, and more equitable tomorrow.